So
Yeah.
you always want to, in my opinion, you always want your utility belt, like Batman, right? To have as many weapons around that tool belt as possible.
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Jerry Brazy podcast. We got a fantastic guest with us today, somebody that I hooked up with here on LinkedIn, and I'm really interested in an exchange that we had and some questions for him. Cauveé is his name. He is a fulfillment coach known as the Inspiration Engineer, which is something I want to dig into. I love that title. Giving entrepreneurs a boost in energy, confidence, courage, and the courage to take massive action towards their purpose using the power, strategy, music, and entertainment industries. Cauveé's given recently TED Talks called The Rise of the Inspiration Engineers. He's featured in the Huffington Post as a strategist to watch, has published in Thrive Global, Referral Rock. He's spoken at the University of Delaware, California State University, YMCA, Toastmasters, and many more. His very first student broke six figures, became another one Northeast Division selling representative at Zillow. So, welcome, Cauveé. Appreciate you coming on. That's quite a bio you got going on there.
Yeah, Jerry, I appreciate it. I am really grateful to be here, really grateful to share kind of my experiences and deliver a lot of value.
Let's just start off with a term I had never heard before, Inspiration Engineer. Talk to me about that.
So what happened was I found I didn't fit in a box, right? So Jim Rohn, Zig Ziglar, all these guys, they say the more skills you have, the more valuable you are to the marketplace, which is true. However, the more skills you have, the more the marketplace might be confused if it doesn't fall under one umbrella. So it's not like speaking languages. You say, I speak English, Spanish, French, Mandarin, Italian. Nobody's like, okay, Jerry, but which one do you speak?
Yeah.
When it comes to skills, people look at the identity to the skill. So when I would go to Chamber of Commerce or something like that, I was a sales guy. When I was around marketers, I was a marketer. When I was around musicians, I was an audio engineer, a poet, a singer, a rapper, whatever. And I felt inauthentic. So I was like, I need a title that ties in all the skills that I have, the way in which I serve, and my purpose, and have a title that fits me. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm a coach, and these are all the things I do. And so I had my community vote on 10 titles, and they are the ones that chose Inspiration Engineer.
Okay. All right. So you took that and you ran with it. Give us a little bit of background. You covered quite a bit there on the different things that you do. Give us some background on yourself.
Yeah. So I grew up middle class in Indiana. And, my dad was in the factory. That was his life. He was working like 2-3 jobs at one time. My mother was a stay-at-home mom for my siblings. And then when it came to me, she went into the HR world. So my dad would give me what I call these hero speeches. He'd be like, son, you can do whatever you want to do. Be who you want to be. Like anything you set your mind to is yours, right?
Right.
So I started mentoring when I was in about 5th grade with a guy who we hear about, the types of people that write songs. A celebrity takes that song and you never hear about the originator. So when I'm in the studio, like hitting buttons and just making sounds, basically, I started putting my poetry that I was writing in 5th grade and then putting this to now music, which it wasn't music, it was noise, but
Right.
You get the point.
Yeah.
So I fell in love with that process. And I go to my dad and I was like, Dad, I figured out what I'm going to do. And he's like, what is it, son? What do you want to be? I was like, I'm going to be a musician. And my dad was like, you can't do that. And it wasn't that reverse psychology, like, you can't do that 70s show type of dad.
Yeah.
It was like, you literally can't do this. And so my dad, I say, gave me the gift of ferocity because he was public enemy number one. And I was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. So now I'm going to condense the story. We sold out a concert of 1,209 people when I was 18 years old. So I was locally famous in this town of about 16 to 25,000 people. From there, went to college, didn't make any money on that. The school did. And I was like, I'm going to duplicate that success. So all of your people, like your Master P, 50 Cent, Jay-Z, all these guys take drug money and funnel that money into their career. I didn't want to sell drugs and do it like they did. So
Right.
I was putting on these concerts, and my sophomore concert flopped miserably. We sold 333 tickets out of 3,500. So I went through like seeds of depression and all these different things that kind of spiraled from there. From 2000, that's 2003, 2005. So from that time to 2012, I worked for Google, University of Phoenix, Dish Network, all these different companies, learning sales psychology, how humans work, sitting with the top performers, reverse engineering what they do for success. And I started picking that apart. At the University of Phoenix, I helped a lady get her associate's degree, which is where my love for coaching came, because I was her mentor and the sales guy that brought her in.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I started learning about entrepreneurship and how companies and tech companies, SaaS and all these things are built, and then how they get funded. And I was like, this is the exact same process that a musician goes through. What if I combined the two worlds? What if I created something new? And that was the thought that propelled me on the journey that I'm on.
So let's, in that story there, and thank you for telling us that, when you sold the 333 tickets and you're sitting in a venue that's essentially empty, 3,500 seats, and you're crushed. I hear this all of the time, and I laugh at it a little bit, good-naturedly though, and that is that so many times young people come up against what is just a learning lesson, that we more mature guys that have been through the wars recognize as a great experience. What a fantastic experience to have when you're, I don't know, it sounds like you're about 20 years old or so, however old you were.
Sure.
What a great experience. But at 20 and 22, it can absolutely traumatize you. And many guys use the terms that you used about having what would otherwise just be a learning experience. How do you communicate that to young dudes to say, without sounding like the old man that walked up the hill both ways in the snow with no shoes on? You know what I mean?
So what I tell people is, first off, I think we need to restructure, reframe how we do grades. I think, the A should be an E, which means excellent. The F should be an L, which means learning, right? There's really no such thing as failure. And you brought up a great point, was my perspective around being deflated or being defeated or being, embarrassed, humiliated, all these feelings. I didn't see it for what it was. And here's the interesting thing, right? I'm now in Austin, Texas. So if we do a 333 event now, that sells out all of downtown.
Yeah.
Like all of the venues are packed. And you probably got a line outside for a majority of them. So that's still a fantastic outcome. But as far as in a 3,500 or 3,300 capacity auditorium, it did feel like crickets. And I would tell people the big thing that my older brother used to say to me, and I think this is very important as adults, no matter your age, you got to manage your highs and you got to manage your lows. There's going to be a lot more failures, quote unquote, a lot more learning lessons than there are the highs.
Sure.
You got to stay balanced in between both, not just the lows. You got to manage that ego a little bit. So that's what I would tell the young guys.
Yeah, and one of the things that I preach from an entrepreneurial perspective is I don't get too high and I don't get too low, because on both sides of that is where bad decisions get made.
Absolutely.
And like you said, sometimes though, when you're young and you just took it in the mouth, it can be tough to swallow that. So I'm always looking for a good way to communicate that to the guys that it is truly a learning lesson. And I promise 5 years from now you're going to laugh at how bad you took this now.
Right, as they say, the story makes sense looking back. Right,
yeah,
it doesn't make sense going in it or going through it. But when you're looking back of how everything ties together, it builds up your character to who you are. It makes you stronger in the process.
Without a doubt, yeah. But in the moment, man, it's a tough one to take that punch in the mouth.
For sure.
You and I had an exchange online there that I wanted to kind of follow up on, because I think we have a disagreement about love and passion and what I call opportunity. So let's talk about that for a second, if you don't mind. Tell us. There's a lot of in your bio about passion and love and following and doing what you love to do. I'm more of an opportunity guy. Tell us about your take on. I guess it's in the context of finding who you want to be and what you want to do, and also finding success in life. We want to be happy. Tell us what your philosophy is on that.
Sure. So my philosophy, not right, wrong, or indifferent, is the philosophy that works for me. So I wouldn't tell somebody else that they should absorb this philosophy. Find your own within kind of the nuggets of what I'm sharing.
Sure.
So as a Christian entrepreneur, first and foremost, I believe that book is written by God. So there's a lot in there about peace. And I think at the end of the day, majority of us are seeking a life of peace and happiness and joy. And from what I found, granted, I think there's a little bias because I found it early and I get that
Yeah.
question all the time, like, Cauveé, I don't know what I want to do. At the same time, I want it to be crystal clear that by having a lot of money or a lot of materials, people think that's going to equate happiness and joy. That is false.
I
So
agree.
I come across entrepreneurs all day long that are six-figure-naires, seven-figure-naires, and they're emotionally broke, or they haven't found, like, there's no love to what they're doing. They're flipping businesses or real estate or whatever it is that they're doing to generate revenue, and they're doing that, and they've found a certain level of mastery in that. But when it comes to all the different fulfillment buckets, they're certain ones that are out of balance, if you will. And so that's my main message, is to find that theme that I believe everybody's heart has, that maybe one thing or a couple things that they love doing. They do it all the time, and you would do it whether somebody paid you for it or not. And if
Sure.
you have that and find that, figure out a way to monetize that, figure out a way to share that, there more than likely will be a community around that. And now you can help those people within those communities, so it just circulates within that ecosystem. And that, I truly have found, that's really what success really is.
Okay, and I think that's fair. I'm probably more literal about it, where I'm do follow your, do work passionately on things that you can find, on opportunities that you could take advantage of, so that you can go work on your passions. So I don't think we're that far apart. If saving the rainforest is your thing, I always say to people, you can't save the rainforest if your company's not making money. Right, you don't have any
Right.
more money to go do what you're passionate about, and so I think for me, that's kind of, I always kind of push back a little bit on, find that thing that you love and go do it. To tell that to a 25-year-old kid, because while you're so busy figuring out this one lane, opportunities might walk by right in front of you that you could take advantage of, that would help you then do those things that you're passionate about.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. I would also say, Gary Vee talks about his philosophy around sports. Like, not everybody is going to be that 6'5" basketball player, and you may
Right.
love basketball, and maybe you're 4'2". And I'm not saying we got Muggsy Bogues and people like that or
Right.
whatever, but the cards didn't work out in your favor.
You just
to have
dated
to-
yourself. You just dated yourself with that Muggsy Bogues reference. Spud Webb and Muggsy Bogues.
But then, sometimes the cards may not work out, which will propel you or push you in another direction. I
Right.
think you've got to be flexible in that way, and I totally agree with what you're saying.
So we talked about the concert that went bad. What failures do you look back on that have been building blocks for you? I mean, we talked about that one obviously, but there must be more.
Yeah, there's been a lot. I've hired over 33 people. I've had a lot of turnover, as being a leader, trying to find my leadership style, figure out, who I want to be and how I want to be the type of leader that is someone that I'm, proud of, and that can really accelerate that type of culture. And, I feel like I'm just now walking into that, actually, like really getting where it's like, I like this. That's been a huge area of learning. Additionally, if someone would have told me to build the systems, the infrastructure, the funnels, the automation for each and every skill that I have, and do them one at a time, that is huge. I would not say go get a lot of different skills that don't all overlap or align
Yeah.
and try to launch them all at once. I would
Right.
definitely do that backwards. So I would master one, and then I would execute on that one, and then I would master the next one, and then build the systems and everything for that one, and then continue to build in that way versus in the way in which I've done it.
What are with that in mind and those experiences in mind, what is it that what is your main selling point as a coach that you're going to bring to somebody, either be it University of Phoenix and helping them graduate, or I'm assuming entrepreneurs grow their businesses, or people follow their passions and put into practice what they would like to, what they kind of see in their heads? What is that you bring exactly to what would be essentially a client, I suppose?
Sure. So there's what I offer today and where we're going, right? So being that I'm a musician, We have a product that's right now in stealth called Motivation Music that I want to share with everybody today. Give a little bit of boost on that. So if you're into hip hop, pop, R&B, and you're an entrepreneur and you love like resilience, you like Gary Vee, Lewis Howes, Eric Thomas, people like that, we have a pretty wide net as far as people that are going to enjoy the type of music that we make. We use music, and a lot of edutainers do this. Elon Musk released a song like 2 weeks ago. So what you see is now these creatives that are using their creative talent as like a lead gen magnet, right? So now it's another way for us to have a similarity, a commonality, and to engage. So first and foremost, if you love that type of music and you're an entrepreneur, we need to have a conversation and talk about that. My level of mastery is building that personal brand. So where we're heading, and to bring that full circle, I believe that there's an edutainment movement that's on the rise. You're going to start seeing more and more people with these unique hybrids. There's a guy out of LA that's called the surfing agent. He's a surfer. All of his Instagram is about surfing, but he's a real estate agent, so he combined the two. So
Let me make sure that people hear that word, because I didn't catch it the first time, but I caught it the second time. You're saying edutainment. Edutainment, correct? Education and entertainment. I didn't hear that the first time correctly, and I caught it the second time. So I want to make sure that my listeners can hear edutainment is the word that you're using.
Yes, edutainment is going to be a game changer.
Yes.
So edutainers are going to need an ecosystem that supports them, and that's where Cauveé is headed. So the things that I help people with now is sales, marketing, branding, and then structure of that. If that whole system and that whole map out, if you will, and that's what we help people do.
Does it? Let me make sure everyone knows we're talking to Cauveé. He is a fulfillment coach known as the Inspiration Engineer, and you can look him up. His name is, or the spelling on that is at Cauvee. Cauveé. You can get him Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn is where he and I met up. Twitter, and I'm assuming everywhere else the social media is. That is Cauvee. Go look him up there. So just to follow through on that a little bit. You're looking for a very specific personality type, then, that can find the return on what you're teaching them. Because the more introverted people, and let me back up. Maybe I don't want to answer the question for you. As I hear you say that, I'm thinking, what do you do about that introverted person that doesn't have that entertainment part of the edutainment, or doesn't think they have that in them? How do you approach that?
Well, I would first tell that person that if they're giving themselves that label, then they are going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Sure.
What I mean by that is there is a such thing as a left brain and a right brain. The first student that you mentioned in my bio was a COO level brain. So he thinks very sequentially, methodically, analytically, these types of that thinking operation pattern, right? So I had to adjust my style for him and start sending long emails that have a works cited and everything already fact checked for us to be able to be on the same page. So when I say that is there are certain people that are more outgoing and extroverted, and introverts do have, when they go around social communities, it detracts from their energy. They feel like worn out. So there's people out there like Carlos Gil, Matthew Pollard, that are introverts that still show that path of being an introvert and being extroverted. I know another guy named Mark Mobley. He's an artist and he's an introvert. So don't think that if you're an introvert that boxes you in. That just means you're going to have to do extra work to be extroverted. So
yes,
you got to put that work in. One other thing I want to tell everybody, if there's some beginners listening on the show, if I was going to build a prerequisite stack of skills, the first skill I would tell you is to go master public speaking, because 75% of the market is afraid to public speak. So you're going to be 25% ahead just by having that skill and the ability to be witty and think on your toes. And that's for anybody, which is where the Toastmasters training came into play. So if you are an introvert and if you have a creative talent, we can talk. There just might be some coaching that we need to implement in order for you to get comfortable interfacing with people, whether that's digitally or in person.
And the very nature of the introvert, I think, would preclude them from calling you, which is why I asked the question, because I know a lot of people who have a lot of information, and have a lot to offer, but they're so unsure of themselves in the public sphere that's hard for them to get that out there. And hearing you talk, that's why I asked you that question, because hearing you talk and hear what you're offering, many introverts wouldn't reach out to you because they think that that's an extroverted personality, A, and then B, by the nature of being an introvert, they're not going to call about doing something in the public sphere.
Well, that's interesting. I think if they're introverted and they have a creative gift, I would actually challenge that. I don't have any data to challenge that, but I think that if that's what they wanted to be their anchor of their brand, and being that we would represent that anchorage, I think that they would reach out and just to figure out how does that work, for them specifically. So
Right.
anyway, with that, if you guys, have any questions about that or concerns, by all means, reach out, because I would love to, help anybody individually that's having that challenge.
Yeah, and really, I guess that's the point of my question along this line, is to tell people who would not otherwise to reach out to somebody like yourself and see what. Have a conversation. Don't not do it because you think you can't, because your personality has always been the one that sat in the back of the class with your head down. Mm-hmm. Someone like you can bring those skills out in somebody and give them the ability to go out and do that thing in their head that they kind of visualize or fantasize that they'd like to do. So I think we're on the same page in that I want to encourage someone who may not, because their personality precludes them from making a phone call to somebody like you, to just take that step and make that phone call.
Yeah, and so everybody knows the growth is in the discomfort. Don't think
Yes,
because
it
we're
is.
extroverted and that it's comfortable all the time. It's not.
Yep.
Like, that's not the reality. So you've got to put yourself in uncomfortable situations if you want that growth.
You got to build that muscle.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. How did you, let's talk about branding for a couple of minutes here. Personal branding. What is your tips on exposure or influence? Everybody's always wondering, how do I build that brand? So if we were, one of the questions here that we had down was 5 tips, but just give us some idea from you on the best way for somebody listening to get started for building out that exposure in their brand.
Absolutely. So step 1, you want to develop a level of mastery around a skill or a set of skills, right? And you want to do what I call testimonial stacking. So once you go above and beyond for that client, or maybe you got to volunteer early on, don't have any clients, then you need to get the testimonial, you're checking. So when you check in to see how things are going, you've already been crushing it. So now we're going to get a testimonial from them in exchange for the feedback. How's everything going? Oh, Jerry is loving Cauveé. Okay, cool. Could you do me a favor? Sure.
Right.
What do you need? And you get the testimonial, right? So that's number 1. Number 2, you want to really master what we call relationship acquisition. So it's relationships drive revenue. And by doing that, you're always being of value before you're asking for something in return. Okay. So now you've got your testimonials. Now you've got a level of mastery around what people call sales. We don't call it sales because that's just an outdated word. And then you're developing relationships because your network is your net worth. Right? Now, number 3, you got to build your authority. And to build your authority, you need other sites to validate those skills that you have. So for me, getting on Huffington Post as a coach was step number 1. Number 2, I wanted to be leveraged as a speaker. So where do you do that? TED, right? It's a platform that everybody knows. So you want to be on an authoritative site that can validate that branding. And then going back to the testimonial stacking, now you're leveraging your credibility stack. So when I go and talk to people now and I say, hey, I'm a Huffington Post strategist, coach, or I'm a TED speaker, people automatically like, okay, Cauveé's got something to offer me.
Yeah.
And that is how you start building that brand. And you just keep doing that over and over and over. And eventually your awareness starts to spread.
You used a word there, relationship, when it comes to sales. Again, I've been in this game for a long time, and I've owned a dozen companies, and so sales is critical. And one of the things that I get pushback on, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Sure.
On new entrepreneurs, I always tell them, you're going to start your company. Whatever the company is that you're doing, you have to sell that company. You have to sell that product. But for most product selling, it's still a one-on-one relationship business. So Absolutely. You can't just make a YouTube video. You can't just start an Instagram. You can't just start commenting on Twitter. You have to actually go sit down and sell what you're doing sell what you have to that person, or you have to get them on the phone. You can't avoid having conversations and building those relationships. I get a lot of pushback because it's, we're such a social media world today. That's not been my social media is important. We're sitting here doing it. I don't want to say it's not, but I think there's this idea that all I got to do is do a YouTube video, get an Instagram up, and start my Twitter, and the sales are just going to start pouring in. That's not been my experience. What would you tell somebody who would think that?
Both. I would say it's not an either or, right? I mean, there are people that have YouTube influencer mastery or Facebook level mastery where they know ads inside and out. All of their sales is like a copy based sales funnel that goes to a video sales letter, and they don't interface with a person, face to face or on the phone. Or maybe you run an Amazon business and e-commerce, and it's kind of the same thing where we're looking at reviews for validation and moving through that process. However, with what you're saying about being able to interface with someone and being able to close on the phone, if you have that ability, again, you're ahead of the marketplace, because a lot of people don't know how to do that. So you always want to, in my opinion, you always want your utility belt, like Batman, right? To have as many weapons around that tool belt as possible. So I would always tell somebody, I don't think it's you have to have that skill, but you're only doing yourself a disservice by not mastering that skill. And again, if you're going to go master public speaking, which was my very first tip, right? All sales, and tell me if you agree, I think sales is just a matter of asking the right questions at the right time and being able to ask hard questions. That's really all it is, because you're just guiding them through the process. Would you agree with that or disagree with that?
No, I wouldn't disagree with that. I would boil it down even a little bit further. Sales are all about being able to hear no.
Facts.
So when you can hear that no, then you're on your way, because there's a few sales in every 100 no's, but you got to be able to go through those no's in order to get to them.
Absolutely.
And also, most of the people that we talk to here that are listeners on my podcast, and most business is local. So I always come from the perspective of, we're not building out Facebook, and that's the advice where my advice comes from. Is it's the guy starting his lawnmower business, or it's the guy starting his ice cream shop, that sort of thing. That's because so much business is local and not national. So building out your Amazon reseller isn't quite the same, I suppose, as the guy that's trying to start his, like I said, the lawn mowing business. So that's where I come from, where you got to go knock on doors, man. You got to have your online presence, but you got to knock on doors.
Or at least have a team member that's going out.
Or have somebody
doors, right?
that'll hear those 100 no's. We have just a couple of minutes left, Cauveé. I really appreciate it. Again, we're talking to Cauveé. That's Cauvee. You can catch him. His website's www.cauveé.com. hello@cauveé.com. You can get him there. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, everything at Cauveé. With a couple of minutes that we have left, what would you like to leave our listeners with? Again, as I've said, most of our listeners are, we're an entrepreneur. What's possible? I come from a very humble background, 8 brothers and sisters, and I was on the street at 17. And so I'm all about what's possible and what people can do. So, particularly people who don't think they can, I'm trying to explain to them how they can.
Yes.
And with that said, with the 2 minutes that we have left here, what would you like to leave them with?
I want people to understand that if you have a dream, if you have a vision, if you have a gift, that gift was given to you for a reason. And I personally believe that gift was given for you to use it. So if you're not going on that path to use that gift, and I think a lot of people are looking for the outside world to validate what's happening on the inside of what they want to do. And I want you to understand, I even heard Will Smith say it just the other day. He said, nobody knows what you're to do but you. It comes down to you. And even though you may not have all the answers, you got to listen to that whisper inside, that heart of what it's really telling you, where it's taking you, and be able to take risks and take that leap of faith and go along that journey. Don't look for the outside world to validate you, because it took my own parents 14 years, heard my music every day, to say this is actually possible for you. So if you look at the data there, what would a stranger tell you? So just don't look for the outside world to validate your dreams, your gifts, and your visions.
Those closest around us can more often not be the ones that hold us back the most.
Facts.
I don't quite understand how that is, but that seems to be the way of the world. Cauveé, I enjoyed the conversation. Tell us again. I think I got all your socials. Is there anywhere else? Where do we go for your music?
So it's everywhere in 200 plus stores throughout the world. The single's called "Give It Time." So if you type my name, Cauve, and then put "Give It Time," you will find the record, and go check it out and let us know with a review or some way on social media what you guys think about that.
All right, that's fantastic, Cauveé. I appreciate you coming on. I really do. Half an hour's, all of these podcasts, we could flesh all this out. I could talk about this with you for an hour and a half. So I encourage my listeners to go check him out. This has been a really neat conversation. I'd love to have more of it. I appreciate you coming on.
Awesome. Thank you, Jerry. You guys
all right,
be good.
Thank you.